It's International Women's Day, and I want to mark it by talking to a strong woman, the great Australian. Gina Rinehart is Australia's richest person. Some snarky journalists have sniped, well, that couldn't have been too hard because Rinehart inherited a company from her father, Lang Hancock, the legendary miner, almost the father of West Australia's iron ore industry. But that is selling Gina Rinehart way, way short. When she inherited Hancock Prospecting, it was a mess, up to its neck in debt. Rinehart turned it around and herself proposed, developed and now runs the giant Roy Hill mine in the Pilbara, as well as extensive agricultural businesses. Hancock Prospecting is now so important to this country that last year alone it paid $2.7 billion in taxes for schools and hospitals and so on. Normally Gina Rinehart doesn't give interviews. She doesn't trust journalists. She's right. But we've been friends for years and she wouldn't even come on my show. But today she will. Because the pandemic and the war in Ukraine, the rise of China, all of these make her think, as I do, that Australia really must wake up. Gina Rinehart, we've talked so often in the past, and I'm glad you finally agreed to come on the show to take up some of the issues that we've talked about before. But let me start, it is International Women's Day today. Let me start with an easy one. What is your advice to women wanting success in business?
Hi, Andrew. I'm not sure that the advice is going to be appreciated, but I think there's just no shortcuts where hard work is concerned and essential. There are many, many businesses that fail. And I think that if you're interested in just doing this part-time work-life balance, not working public holidays or weekends, as I said, there's many, many businesses that fail. So starting a business mightn't be the best for you. I mean, I only wish there was less government tape, because that makes it a lot easier for people starting and running businesses.
Look, you've been talking about it for many years now, Gina. But yeah, I can't help but, I mean, I've said to you in the past, I can't believe how many stories there have been having a go at you for being rich and in the mining business. You've got the double whammy going there. Now, it seems to me, though, we're learning really fast at the moment that we can't afford that kind of contempt now for wealth creation. Let's remember iron ore, coal, the two biggest exports we've got. Certainly we can't afford that kind of contempt after this pandemic and the lockdowns, and now, of course, this very challenging rise in the power of China.
Andrew, I really hope you're right. It is absolutely critical for Australia to keep up its revenue. In other words, through the mining industry, it is our biggest producer of revenue. I think people did see this a lot through COVID, that how essential the mining industry was as far as providing revenue. And of course it goes far more than that. We must be sufficient, self-sufficient in our minerals. Not just ore and coal, of course, but widespread rare earths, lithium, you name it. It is really essential in these days and times especially that we have a strong, growing mining industry.
And it's not just that, is it? I mean, when I look at a country like Taiwan, they've got the sort of population we do. They've managed to almost corner the market in microchips, semiconductors, things like that, which are essential now in modern technology. But we seem like a sitting duck. I don't know that we have become self-sufficient enough to withstand the kind of tensions we're seeing now. We've got to get more economically self-sufficient. For a start, what do you think?
I totally agree with you, Andrew. I think, we need self-sufficiency in medicines, we need self-sufficiency in defence materials, luckily we do have self-sufficiency in food, and I think we need to do a bit more in the mining industry. But we desperately need self-sufficiency, and we desperately need, in my view, a refocus on our budgets, our federal budgets, to include more for defence. And, a lessening of tape for businesses who want to go in the areas I've just mentioned. We need less tape, let's call it less red tape, so that we can see more self-sufficiency in medicines, in defence supplies, and other things this country needs, including mining.
Well, I'll go a bit further too. I think what we're also learning is, and boy, did Europe learn this, right? They had all these weird green policies. So, like Germany got rid of nuclear power. They got rid of a lot of coal-fired power. Countries like Britain cracked down on fracking and all this and they made themselves so dependent on Russian gas that at first they weren't going to challenge Putin in any way, seriously, to stop this invasion of Ukraine. We are now learning we can't afford to be so in hoc with dictatorships like China. And we've got to trade more with democracies like, India, so that the free world is stronger and less dependent on dangerous countries. Now, you've promoted trade with India for years, but I don't know, the way the left here, for instance, campaigned furiously to kill the Adani coal mine, which is coal for India. I just couldn't believe that. Well, of course, trade with China, that's fine.
You've covered quite a few topics there, Andrew. But I think one of the things that we need to think about as a country is economic sanctions. Now, you can't have economic sanctions if you're of any merit and of any usefulness, if you are prevented as a country from getting the supplies you might need from countries that are no longer friendly with you and creating war. And a huge example of this was given with Biden recently. He's done a lot of green stuff to his country. Fuel prices at the petrol pump are already rising in his country, and ditto energy costs, power costs, electricity costs. So what happened when he started his somewhat feeble sanctions is the main one he should have been targeting against Russia is, of course, fuel. And he didn't, because of the rising costs at the petrol pump through his green policies, the rising costs of electricity. But, we have to be in a position where we can make economic sanctions work. We've really and truly learnt from that. Good call in relation to Adani. They've struggled so hard in Australia with all sorts of restrictions against them for helping to open up this Galilee Basin. May I mention that we were actually the first to have a little mining pit there, well, not so little actually. We should be thinking about the hundreds of millions of people living without electricity in India, and coal helps them to have that. Their own coal is much dirtier than ours, and I think on friendly terms with a friendly country, we should be thinking of doing exports, whether it's to India or other friendly countries.
Now, if China really wanted to hurt us, Gina Rinehart, it would stop buying our coal and iron ore and, just switch us off. This country would be pancaked. And it's already been looking to alternative suppliers. Quite obviously, this is part of a long-term plan, big deposits in Africa and Brazil, in part to play, suppliers off against each other, but also to be able to, wield the stick when it needed to. How vulnerable are we?
You're right, of course. China is led by terribly intelligent people, and they do see things at a further distance, more in the future than what we do, or we seem to do. And let's face it, Australia is not the only country with iron ore and coal, and they are going all over the world to open up not only more iron ore and coal mines, but rare earths, lithium. And, we have been a little inactive in relation to these very critical matters.
I know. How long do you think before they've got sort of stick to wield over us in terms of alternative supplies? Like some of those deposits in Africa they're working on are really big.
They're huge, and they're also high-grade ore. So Australia should be very mindful of this. We really depend on our mining industry, and if a lot of it was markets were closed, we would be a different country. We need our mining industry for our defence, for our police, for our emergency services, our kindergartens, our hospitals and healthcare. You name it, we really are dependent on our mining industry. And so if we lose markets, it's extremely important to us.
Gina Rinehart, always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much for your time.
And thank you, Andrew. You have great programs. Thank you.
Honestly, the Greens, you say, no more coal, no more oil, leave it in the ground. They have no idea of how helpless it would be if they got their way.